So it's another week and another range of models sent to the world of Legends by Games Workshop. Let's talk about the miniatures that have disappeared and what it generally means for 40k going forward. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the latest Warhammer 40k update from Games Workshop, and specifically taking a look at a whole load of Orky Forge World units that seem like they'll only be taken to the table in casual games from now on, and the rules are going to be mothballed going forward. Basically, this week in Warhammer 40k, we've been expecting points updates for Orks and Custodes. Their codexes go on full sale on Saturday, and usually it's the pattern that their points updates happen on the few days before that, often on the Thursday before, though it can vary a little bit from day to day. Already from the codex, we knew that a whole load of units were missing. They were likely going to get Legends datasheets, things like Captain Badruk or Mad Dog Grotznik. Certainly a shame to lose them. It does seem to have been a theme with 10th edition codexes that Games Workshop's trying to wind down as much resin as possible out of their current ranges. Lots of things that they've been selling up till recently just flat out not being in the codex when it comes around if they hadn't got around to updating them to a plastic kit yet. Having their rules moved to Warhammer Legends might affect some more than others, I'd say. They can still be used in match play games, they've got points costs and everything, but are just generally no longer considered balanced and they aren't taken into account with Games Workshop's points updates or anything like that. And it generally gives the community a bit of a feeling that they're just no longer really recommended if you want to play fair with the army. It does perhaps make any sort of high-end strategy around clever tricks with the units maybe just feel a little bit like you're overthinking a unit that Games Workshop hasn't really considered for balance purposes anyway. Though of course there's nothing to stop you getting good use out of them in casual games. Plenty of people can and do play with Legends if you're not trying to have a game that could be in a tournament, for example. Even for people using them like that way though, I'd still say it's pretty bad news though. Whenever units get their rules sent to Legends, it just means that Games Workshop is likely to pay them less and less attention going forward as further editions and codexes come out. You might be lucky to get any rules for them in the next edition, for example. Their points costs and just all around rules functionality might decrease with other updates until they stop bothering to update them at all. It's just generally not good news, and it looks like Orks have got a lot more where that was coming from, as it looks like Games Workshop has basically sent the entire Ork Forge World range en masse to Warhammer Legends, all besides one big model. Literally everything else, whether it was in production or not, is getting that treatment. The update was done via the digital update to the Legends document on the Warhammer 40k downloads page. It looks like that's been updated prior to the main points update, which as mentioned is likely to be coming in the next couple of days. Before we get into the specific kits, I feel like it's just worth mentioning that Games Workshop has very much had this trend outstanding for quite some time. They are basically winding down Forge World models for Warhammer 40k, and it seems like their eventual endpoint is to have literally nothing in Forge World resin that's actually active for their current mainstream Warhammer 40k game, besides maybe a few really big models that they might struggle to produce in plastic, perhaps some slightly more Titan class things. In fairness, it's maybe not the worst idea to try and transition as much as possible towards plastic. The resin can get good details, but it's not really the nicest material to work with, and it generally costs far more than their plastic kits. Plus, I feel like the rather vast array of Forge World units that have been released for certain factions never really seem to get great rule support. Perhaps for certain factions like the Adeptus Custodes, they still tend to be quite relevant, but for many of the rest, the rules are often perhaps a little bit janky, and their points costs often leave quite a lot to be desired. In general, it seems to be Games Workshop's endpoint that Forge World is going to be used for the Horus Heresy setting and their specialist games. They do have quite a lot of releases for things like Necromunda. The way that they've been unfolding this is that the least popular kits have been gradually going away and not coming back for each faction. Over the past few years, there's been multiple waves of things going last chance to buy from Games Workshop web store, with certain kits just going out of production. Games Workshop generally choosing to start with the things that don't sell quite as well, which is maybe understandable, taking out the less popular things from the range bit by bit, until only the things that are quite popular remain. And then even then we've had a few big swoops where they've just taken out entire factions' ranges. The Space Marine and Chaos one towards the start of 10th edition maybe being the most notable before this one. It means that the factions that did have big Forge World ranges now have significantly smaller ones than they did in the past. Lots more big sections of units gone to Warhammer Legends. And as mentioned, perhaps the single biggest hit was to Space Marines and Chaos, where they basically sent all their Horus Heresy era units to Legends, despite the fact that quite a lot of Marine players were quite enjoying getting use out of the Warhammer 40k rules for all the nice new Heresy plastics they'd come out with. Things like Contemptor and Leviathan Dreadnoughts or that Kratos tank. They also hit all the Chaos Space Marine Demon engines at the same swoop, despite them not really being particularly intended for the Heresy setting more so than 40k. Really, that was the first case of a Forge World range going away en masse for a faction. Basically, going forward, certainly don't buy any Forge World models for Warhammer 40k and expect guaranteed rule support into any sort of distant future. Basically, everything's on really quite shaky ground at the moment. The only possible exceptions might be the Custodies and the Imperial Knights, which Games Workshop had previously said they were treating a bit differently. My personal suspicion for those, though, is that they're probably going to redo them both in plastic at some stage. We've already seen several Imperial Knights move to plastic, and it seems very likely that the rest of the Custodies will get a plastic refresh at some stage, maybe more aimed at Horus Heresy more so than 40k. But I feel like we'll probably get some sort of similar Solar Auxilia style release for the Custodies, with their expensive resin models going plastic. In any case, it doesn't look like there's any sort of Custodies legend document to go alongside the Orks, which you would have expected to materialise by now if they were throwing anything to Legends for the Custodies. Now the Orks one is out. In any case, looking through the Orcs Legends, there's 6 units from the Codex that we knew were going away: Captain Badrock, Mad Dog Grotznik, Boss Zagstruck, the Big Mech with the custom force field, the Knob with the War Banner, and the Mech Boy Workshop. These were all ones that were gone from the Codex, so at least they have given them ongoing Legend support, even if that's not worth as much. The only unit that was technically removed from the Codex was the Smasher Squig Knob, though he's been rolled in with the Squig Hog Boys, so he still has full functioning rules, just in a slightly different format. Really quite sad to lose these guys. Plenty of them have been around for a good long time. Perhaps Captain Badrug might be one of the biggest losses for 10th edition specifically, given that he was really quite a fun character to use jumping out of a truck alongside a whole bunch of flash kits. For any of these guys, I feel like there's at least a pretty reasonable chance that they get character sculpts as later releases for the Orcs, unlikely to be in 10th edition, but maybe in 11th edition onwards. I'm sure players will welcome their return if and when that eventually happens with some cool new plastic kits, and they are fun characters with big lore sections in the Codex still, so it's not like Games Workshop is trying to write them out of existence. As mentioned though, the surprise today were the Forge World casualties. Some of these I did feel like they were likely to go to Legends at some point, though I did think they were probably safe for most of 10th edition. A few of them are just flat out surprises though, still have current models on sale, and perhaps less reason to go this way. The models affected are the Grot tanks, the Grot Mega Tank, the standard Squigoth but not the Gargantuan one which remains, the big Kill Tank, the Mega and Mecha Dreads, the Orc Big Track, the Warboss on Warbike, and the Knobs on Warbikes. So really quite a good chunk of datasheets there. I'm sure plenty of people will be affected by at least some of them. Glad to see that the Gargantuan Squigoth did survive. I feel like he is one of the biggest and coolest miniatures out of the Orc army, and I suppose does fit the bill as a bigger, more sort of Titanic class creature as opposed to some of the rest. It would be a shame if Orcs weren't able to field any Squigoth whatsoever. We might have the Beast Snagger kill rig, but it just doesn't really feel the same to me. Taking a look at the Orc section for the Games Workshop web store, it looks like these are the kits that are still on sale. There's still the Kill Tank, the Grot Tank and the Mega Tanks, and both the regular and the Gargantuan Squigoth here. So basically any of these going to Legends was perhaps a bit of a surprise at this point, even if it was sort of expected that some of the rest of them might at some stage or other. Games Workshop generally don't tend to make rules in the long term for things they don't sell models for. Still though, I'm not sure that people were really expecting them to send the out of production stuff to Legends at this point either. It seemed likely that they probably would at some points, but in general they tend to do that when they update the Imperial Armor Compendium, and that usually happens towards the start of an edition, so I think most people were assuming that these things were safe for the rest of 10th. It's certainly even more surprising and disappointing though when kits that are currently on sale suddenly go to Legends. I'm sure at least some people watching this video will have picked up some of these, some of them recently. It's not like they're particularly cheap either. I thought Kill Tank, for example, is around about £150, so a bit under $250 US. I'd certainly be pretty mad if I bought one of those a few weeks back, assembled and painted half of it, and then suddenly its rules goes to Legends before it even finished the thing. And it basically gets made into an afterthought for fully fledged 40k, even if you probably could still make some use of it in more casual games. Looking through the kits that went away though, first up I feel like some of the saddest losses are the Grot Tanks and the Grot Mega Tanks. These are just really fun little miniatures in my opinion, Gretchen crewing some pint-sized tanks that aren't too much bigger than standard infantry, and the Mega Tank is kind of fun at looking like a sort of orky little battleship crewed by Grots. The Grot Tanks in particular were looking like an interesting unit for Dread Mob, given that they were Gretchen crewed vehicles, so should have worked well with its rules. And I guess you can still get some fun games out of them, but not for competitive play it would seem. Looks like these two are still on sale. Hopefully at some point Games Workshop might decide to release them in plastic for a future Orky release. I feel like out of any of the Forge World kits, these would definitely be some of the ones that people have most time for. Long live the Gretchen Revolution and all that. Otherwise, for the standard Squigoth and the Kill Tank, I feel like they're also going to have bigger impacts than some. Both quite fun miniatures, I think. The Squigoth could act as an Orky transport. That's quite a cool and well-known thing from the lore, even if you can still get the big one. And the Kill Tanks were kind of good last edition, so I'm sure a few people might have some on hand from that. It really does make me think that Games Workshop are missing a trick by not having a more standard Orc battle tank with a big gun in the roster. Looted wagons have definitely been a big thing of Orc lore in the past, and a kill tank with a big gun could be one way that you could field things similar to that. Otherwise, the Mecha and Mega Dreads, they've been out of production for a little while now, I think. Pretty chunky and stompy, big Orky Dreadnought type things that stand a fair bit higher than the regular one. I guess for getting use out of them, maybe could try and have them fielded as either a big Death Dread, or maybe try and have them act up a little bit as a Gorkanaut or Morkanaut perhaps. Again, they could have been kind of interesting in Dread Mob for Codex Orcs, given that they're fairly big chunky vehicles to be affected by stratagems and things, and aren't locked out of any being not Titanic models. Lastly, we've got the big track on the left, the sort of Orky transport flamer type thing. Has been an alternative to trucks and battle wagons for a while now. Sometimes it's been interesting enough, and just another fun Orky vehicle as an alternative to the rest. And now it does finally seem like it's curtains for the Warboss on Warbike and the Knob Bikers, certainly both units that have been very relevant in the past for the Orcs. Both of these used to be in the Orc Codex, say in 5th edition. At the time, my overall Warboss for my Orc army was a Warboss on Warbike, and I guess now if you want to field similar models, then it'd be the Deathkiller Wartrike instead. A model that does feel kind of similar, but maybe not quite the same there. It's quite a bit bigger and chunkier and doesn't really feel like a basic bike boss. The Knob Bikers I thought were kind of fun as well. At one point they did get very good in game when you could do some weird wound allocation things with them. They're probably the less remembered about that, the better. Overall, as ever when Games Workshop removes part of their range, super disappointing. And while as expensive Forge World things, they're not the most commonly owned Orc miniatures, I'm sure plenty of people have put a whole lot of time, effort, and money into these things. And while we had the writing on the wall for some of them, I think most people were hoping that they'd at least be able to be used for the rest of 10th edition, and not sent to Legends before that. It just doesn't really seem like they had any massive reason to not keep on the currently on sale models in the same way as they have done for Necrons with their Forge World range. Even if they did absolutely have to remove Grot tanks and the Mega Tank in 11th edition or something, while the models are still on sale, I don't see any reason why they couldn't keep the datasheets in play. Really not sure whether or not that Gargantuan Squigger would still be considered at risk or not. It does feel like it fits better into their Titanic model ethos for 40k Forge World, so it might stick around. I certainly don't feel like you could bank on that though. In any case though, I'd certainly learn lessons from this if you collect any of the other factions. If you're playing Eldari, Tau, Necrons or Guard, they're some of the ranges that have the biggest Forge World ranges left. I'd certainly have it in your mind that Forge World units could be gone at literally any point pretty much. If you're buying the models from Games Workshop, then absolutely do so knowing that the rules probably won't be supported into the distant future. I feel like GW has shown their hand a bit with that between the Space Marine and Chaos changes plus these Orc changes now. I think things are maybe a little bit less certain on that for the Forge World Knights and the Custodies. As mentioned, I'd guess they'll probably eventually aim to port them to plastic, and the rules might stay functional until that point. As ever, you can't really be too sure with Games Workshop though, given they seem to be a bit trigger happy on the range removals these days. In any case, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Look forward to hearing your takes on anything that I've missed, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more news and updates. I'll certainly cover any Orcs points updates that we might get in the next few days. Hopefully they might have some better news for the Greenskins. Otherwise, if you have been enjoying the news and updates, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep the videos coming. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.